Hello, hello, hello. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Greetings, folks. It's a pleasure to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. Today in particular, we're going to be discussing the fascinating conversation, once I get it all ready, because I don't have it ready yet. Lo and behold, we are talking about two different models of the cosmos today. We have the East, which here we see Vishnu with Adishesha, the great arbiter of consciousness and awareness, which exists first in the Eastern system. And then we have the Western system of the Big Bang, where the material reality seems to create consciousness and not the other way around. What came first? Which is the chicken and which is the egg here? And again, which came first in that quandary? Is consciousness something that permeates with metaphysical character beyond all material universes? Or does consciousness fit the material galaxy that we happened to be born into? This is, of course, happening on an astrology channel. I am a Tropical Vedic astrologer, and I have been playing with the fun idea and concept that the Vedic model of the cosmos and the Western model of the cosmos, as I'm vaguely scratching them out, they really both contain a little bit of each other inside of it. The Eastern prognosis is no stranger to atomic materialism, atoms, material matter, and the Western world has a sympathy to the esoteric occult of consciousness. So these two really fit in together, and this is what I'm interested in conveying here. One of the reasons I'm doing this video is because there is what I see being, I'm trying to extrapolate what Tropical Vedic Astrology is on my channel. That's part of what I'm all about here. And in order to do that, I want to contrast it with the Western model of consciousness. When it comes right down to application of astrological techniques and basic concepts and philosophy, the Vedic astrologers do have a different tack than a lot of Western astrologers. But again, a lot of them mesh. I would say, for example, Jeffrey Wolf Green is an evolutionary astrologer. Born in the West, uses Western measurements like I do. He's tropical. But he has a deep seed of Indian and yogic and psychedelic philosophy. So he has the esoteric and the atomic materialist combined together as well. So does Carl Jung. Aleister Crowley has this type of consciousness. And as we move through, we're going to see the difference between these two and how they merge together. But we want to keep our apples apples and our oranges oranges. We want them to be separate, just like how a man and a woman essentially meet in the middle. But it's nice to have the left hand and the right hand to compensate for each other, to complement each other. This is my plan today, folks. And already it's nice to see some of my usual suspects hanging out with me. It's nice to see you, Irene Mack, as well as my friend Susie Underwood. Happy Sunday. And it's always a pleasure to have anybody hanging out with me while I talk about this stuff. Now we have a big presentation today. We have pictures. We've got all the things. So if you want to hang out with me, if you're interested in how this relates to a deep understanding of Vedic astrology, as well, I've got my own psychedelic spin on things. Feel free to hang out. Feel free to ask questions along the way, because this is a live stream, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. And I like the idea of you guys coming along with me for the ride. Now let's get started. We have a pretty big presentation here today. I don't know how long it's going to be. I expect it to be longer than 2 hours. and shorter than 6 hours. You never know. We're going to find out. Let's begin, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. We have 2 models of the cosmos. Again, we've got the Eastern, mystical, and then we've got the Western, atomic materialist. Now, as I like to say, maybe I should have shown a picture of my chart. I'm really going to be showing off my Jupiter and Venus in Virgo here today. I've got a strong emphasis of Virgo in my chart. So a lot of this is coming from a lot of my own very personal forms of research. Keep in mind that I'm sourcing much of the information in this video from various texts, and you can check out the links in my description for some of the texts that I have used in order to develop on this. Whether, I don't know if I have it live at this moment, but after the live, it should all be there. This includes Ganesh Baba's book, Crazy Wisdom, Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, as well as 2 great books, Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson and The Game of Life by Timothy Leary. Probably should have had them all here. I've got them all somewhere. My room is a mess right now. So, I have been getting into Kriya Yoga lately, and the lineage of Yogananda and Lahiri Mahasaya. And I've been poking around at different sources of literature on Kriya Yoga. I'm also doing an apprenticeship with Ryan Kirksack. He's got a great Kriya Yoga apprenticeship online. I intended to have a plug here. Yeah, all my stuff's everywhere, but that's okay. Oh yeah, here we go. I have a little tiny plug for Ryan Kirksack. He's got a kriyayogaonline.com website where you can go and check out how these models of the cosmos work in a practical framework for Kriya Yoga. This isn't directly from him, it's my own synthesis, like I said. Now, through my research in Kriya Yoga, I learned about this gentleman named Ganesh Baba. Ganesh Baba was this wonderful psychedelic human being. And he actually loved to do psychedelics, psychedelic mushrooms. He loved bang, which is cannabis infused with milk. And he has a book has been made about him called The Crazy World, The Crazy Wisdom of Ganesh Baba. And this is it here. It's Psychedelic Sadhana and the Cosmic Energy in Man. So he is this character. He was a popular Indian figure in the New York area in the 70s. He practiced what is called crazy wisdom, and he made this psychedelic diagram called the cycle of synthesis. This is going to be the seed of our 2 models of the cosmos. This really inspired this video from me reading this. It's a Ganeshian product of esoteric synthesis, if there ever was one. Ganesh is a figure of synthesis. Some people relate it to Mercury. And so here we have, again, I should say, this guy was an Eastern Indian person, but he was born in the time when the British were really, he was born 1893, around that area, pretty much very close to the same year as Paramahansa Yogananda. So this is an Indian guy born under the rule of the British Raj. So he had the deep Indian blood, the fiery blood of mysticism, but he came through the very civilized, quote unquote, refined British sort of, he was like an aristocratic person, Indian person in that British world. So he's combining and synthesizing Eastern and Western in his lived experience. So there's a 2-way alchemical flux happening. Here we have consciousness at the top. And then down here at the bottom, we have matter. And these two are moving through each other. Consciousness is at the very top. From consciousness, intelligence is slightly lower. Mind is slightly lower. Life in the biopsychic field. Then we have time, space, energy in the physical, inertio-gravitational field at the bottom. Consciousness through creation creates matter, and then matter through evolution returns to pure consciousness. It's this recycling that sort of reality does for all of us. And this is a blending of the Western and Eastern models. Now at the bottom we see the materialistic vision of evolution. You go from atoms to molecules, amoeba, fish, mammal, eventually Homo sapiens, and then Homo erectus. The yogi is the evolved state of this evolutionary walk. And then pure consciousness even exists beyond the yogi. Consciousness, Ishwara, the metaphysical precept of pure intelligence that pervades the universe. So this isn't necessarily a hierarchy in which one side is better than the other. It ought to be understood in the way, almost like the way the Chinese understand yin and yang in balance. There's the material side of us, and this is the Western model of atoms, evolution. We were born from, and we're going to go through a lot here, folks. This is a very Timothy Leary kind of presentation I have planned here. You know, the atomic matter somehow had the spark of evolution in the Precambrian mud millions of years ago, and this gave birth to flowers, fauna, amoebic life, single-celled organisms that evolved with complexity to eventually become mammals, to eventually become the humans that we are today. This is the atomic materialist understanding of the gestation of life. And that's what this picture is showing on the right side. But to say which side of this, the Eastern on the left and the Western on the right, to ask which side is the bottom, what came first, consciousness or matter? It's like asking which is the bottom on the north or south poles of a magnet. There is none. They create each other through mutual arising, is the phrase. So we have two basic models for conceiving of the cosmos, which are not mutually exclusive and can fit inside of each other. Just as there is a black and white dot on each side of the Tao symbol, a little bit of the black inside the white and a little bit of the white inside of the black. They are predestined to have each other inside each other. The soul and the material body are two sides of the same coin of the soul, of the spirit. And really, we could see this as being, in some ways, I consider it the same reality conceived through the two hemispheres of the brain. There's the methodical Western left hemisphere, and then there's the imaginative right brain, the right hemisphere, the Eastern model. And this is kind of how I have conveyed these two systems, right? We see there's the intuitive philosophy of the right brain, and then there's the rationalist empiricism of the left brain. Now, one important aspect of Indian astrology and other esoteric, mystical approaches is that they usually try to harmonize the hemispheres of the brain in their astrological approach, as I've seen. Now, in my experience, the Western modern philosophy tends to be strictly rational and one-sided. Of course, there's always people in traditions who use both. I've created this video as a love letter from the East to the West, as someone with deep roots in both camps, because I am somebody who really plays with both sides of this thing. So if you were born as a Western-minded person, it's possible that the right brain, the esoteric, occult, imaginative side, might elude you Because we got to dig. A lot of the times when people try to explain astrology, it's coming from the rational left brain perspective, right? And this is what we're talking about here. The rational philosophy of the Western model has analysis, objective facts, patterns, statistical, factual, goal-oriented. This is the people, when you ask them about astrology, their first instinct is to say, what's in the statistics? And that's okay, because this is, again, these are two sides of the same coin. Statistical observational science is going to vastly help out the world of astrology, and it's important work. But it's not really the route to follow if you want to truly flow into the depths of the mystical experience that astrology holds as its source. All the people who have ever tapped into astrological knowledge have always been intuitively tuned in. You know, I often say that the ancient sages who created astrology, especially Eastern Indian mystical sages, they didn't really use telescopes per se. They just looked in the sky. And even before they looked in the sky with the naked eye, they looked within themselves. They saw Jupiter revolving around the signs of the chakras. They felt, because there was so little distraction, that they felt Saturn moving through the chakras of the signs. They felt things going through the houses and the nakshatras inside themselves. And then they said, you know, Jupiter coming into this sign is happening in me, and you can correlate it with that little green-orange light moving through this part of the cosmos. It was an intuitive thing. Rather, a better word is not intuitive, but extrasensory, psychosensory, however you want to say it. Now, the Western model has a lot of people saying, you know, correlating these intuitive things with factual, statistical, data-based evidence. And this is okay, but it's important to really, when you're dealing with an astrologer, when you're going to an astrologer, it might be a good thing to see that they have an idea of both. Because even the mystical world of astrology can lose its footing. And this is kind of where this synthesis is coming from in this video. Now, you can be a Vedic soul-centered person and still conceive of the world through the lens of fact-based science, as the Indians certainly did in ancient times. And I would say it's more difficult to be someone born in the West and to think through the right brain, the intuitive brain, than it is the other way around. Strictly rational people don't often, you know, people who are super into the idea of science, they don't tend to explore the intuitive ramparts of the brain. Now, in my opinion, again, the deepest Indian philosophies and esoteric traditions try to blend both. And this is the most important thing. So there's the Western model, and this is what we call the left-brained ontology of the cosmos, where everything is created from atoms and starts at the Big Bang. There's also the right-brained, the teleological, esoteric basis of the cosmos, where everything is seen as an infinite recycling of etheric consciousness. In the esoteric model, everything exists as a causative meta-principle, even before our biological brains could evolve enough to compute things and develop cognition. In a way, today, you know, we're kind of answering the age-old question. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? If you understand the nature of what this koan is asking, It's asking something deeper than the symbols that are presented on the surface. There was the sound of a tree falling before biological humans could hear it. And that is the universe existing. The universe exists whether anyone is there to experience it or not. Why isn't there nothing? Why isn't there just nothing? There is something. We are here embodying and experiencing the universe. Why is that? It's because the universe was here before we were. Consciousness was here before we were. And this is essentially what we're plugging into today. If a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, it does make a sound. Now, we're going to explore that a little bit more as we kind of go along. Because really, without the soul to experience it, it doesn't exist. You know, it's this the kind of video where we would explore this sort of consciousness. So, let us dig further here. The self, fixed versus unfixed. The discussion of a fixed or unfixed self is important in astrology, is it not? When you are asking your astrologer, what is my essence? Who am I? Different astrologers will have different takes on this. Different astrologers take a different approach to psychoanalysis based on whether they hail from one spectrum, the Western, or the other, the esoteric. Oh, sorry, buddy. I thought my cats were trying to get in. That little fellow was trying to get out. Many Western astrologers are on the scene today who practice through a fundamentally different lens of psychoanalysis than the soul-centric folks who practice esoteric evolutionary astrology in Indian Jyotish. And a key part of the difference here is reincarnation. The concept of reincarnation tends to be the defining aspect that separates soul-centered evolutionary astrology, the esoteric Indian model, from mainstream Western astrology. In my conception, the evolutionary astrology developed by Jeffrey Wolf Green has quasi-Indian roots. So this is reincarnation here. And this is the idea that someone, the same soul, gets eaten by masculine death and then reborn into Prakriti, into the physical human body of time. The soul is infinite, but the body is bound in time by the mother matrix of Mahashakti. And as I said, Jeffrey Wolf Green has quasi-Indian roots. It's sort of it's seeded with this esoteric turn of mind, even though he's a Western astrologer. So such things do exist. The main difference in approach between these two systems is how the self is conceived. It's an interesting thing. In the Western rational philosophy, psychoanalysis views the self as not necessarily being a fixed entity. It's a fluid compendium of fateful events. That's not untrue because, of course, we are changing. We age. We are evolving constantly. Even the soul is going through a state of transmutation and transformation and evolution. But the person experiencing this flux is different from the essential basis of the soul. The Jyotish, Eastern philosophers, tend to consider the self to be an eternal soul. And this is, again, evolutionary astrology as well. The esoteric, the mystical types in this world consider the soul to have some level of permanence, an unchanging nature. that reincarnates life after life. And this makes up the difference between these two models of the cosmos. It's the idea of the fixed soul that kind of bridges between these two systems. And again, of course, they're the same. They meet as one. But the Western views this constant transforming on the surface as being the root. You know, it's like Alan Watts said about the onion. When you go through all the layers of an onion, when you get to the root of it, what's at the center of an onion? There's actually nothing. It's all skins all the way down. The Eastern says there is something, some subtle thing that is at the deep center of all the skins, and the skins change, they transform, but there's something central to it all. The Western model says it's all skins, right? So the Western model of psychoanalysis tends towards behaviorism and nurturing, and that's why we've often seen things like socionics. The Western is all about behaviorism and nurturing, and the nature versus nurture debate. And this is why they commonly observe the personality as a behaviorism figured from the outside in. And this is just like the 16 different sociotypes, such as INFJ, ESFJ, etc. And your chart is built off of the behaviors that you express. And this is contrasted against what is regarded as healthy. So, you know, I've used this type of thing before, and I've even done it with a therapist. And they've given me insights in therapy, which I couldn't get through astrology alone. These methods of self-apprehension are like apples and oranges. They're each useful in their own way. This is pretty different from astrology. And they don't need to necessarily alienate each other. You can be into astrology and also be into socionics. You can be into the soul and see how the behavior of a person has developed to be what it is through socionics. But the esoteric and occult sciences, the left brain, they tend to lean towards the mystical idea of an eternal soul that is not a behavioral spider web of causations in this incarnation alone. It's an eternal soul that continually reincarnates and has roots of behavior related to an inner nature. And the esoteric model regards this as coming from inside out. So we are not necessarily here to discuss different approaches to psychoanalysis, although that's an idea for another video. But I'm glad that, you know, it's important because this is an astrology video. But we're here to talk about the cosmological roots from which these approaches stem. So let's go into these in a little bit further detail. I hope this is somewhat of an answer to what B is asked here. B is asked, where does it all come from? I think when they asked that, we were talking about how the mystical sages saw the planets going through internally. And it was the internal vision that led to the astrology as we know it as an expression of the external universe, in my opinion. They saw what's inside them first and correlated it to the planets outside, not the other way around. And it's nice that Irene says she's been watching Habits of the Planets with Ernst Wilhelm. I think anything that Ernst Wilhelm touches is brilliant and beautiful. So I agree with you there, Irene. So we have a Western and a Eastern model of the cosmos. So let's look at the Western model. In the Western conception of the cosmos and astrology, we have regarded the array of planets in our galaxy through the atomic materialist narrative of the Big Bang. It's indeed a miracle that we have the planets arrayed in such a way that life on planet Earth can evolve and grow into the human consciousness that we know today. the how the Earth is situated from the sun with all the other planets to reflect the chakras is an incredible synchronism. The miracle of life in our galaxy, and just how specifically the arrangement of the planets are, is something else. It's likely that Earth is the only planet with the specific life-bearing conditions it has within the space of thousands of light years in every direction. There's so much life out there. Life on Earth as we know it is a very fickle phenomenon, and this is this Goldilocks theory. Earth revolves in a perfect distance from the sun for life to exist. Water would evaporate and trees could not grow if it was too close to the sun. And things would be too cold if the Earth was too far away. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's just right. As this is what's called the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's just right. Now, there's even more things that make life on our planet even more amazing. Another unlikely phenomenon we have in our galaxy that is critical for life is the presence of a Jupiter. Jupiter is actually often regarded as the liver of our galaxy, and it relates to the wood element in Chinese astrology, which is a fascinating thing in its own. Thank you, B. I see that you're a she, and B has, when she asked that question, all questions are welcome here. Whether it's coming from the Eastern brain or the Western brain, it's going to be useful to us. And Susie Underwood says, how our moon eclipses the sun perfectly from our view on Earth is also just amazing. There's so much going on there. So, we're talking about the Jupiter here, and it's almost like the liver of the galaxy. And like I said, Jupiter rules the liver and the wood element in Chinese astrology, which I think is a fascinating thing. The size of Jupiter in its orbit, its particular orbit, wards off invasive comets or other invasive incoming asteroids that come too close to entering the zone of the inner planets, for the most part. Not always, though. Sometimes Jupiter has actually invited in, unwieldy asteroids and things. But for the most part, Jupiter is this goalie. It's making sure that Earth doesn't get hit by comets and stuff like that. Jupiter is also being recognized in many astronomical documentaries that you can catch online as being an important marker for life to occur in a galaxy, simply because it's largely responsible for the wobble of the sun spinning around what's called the barycenter. Irene Mack just mentioned that in the chat. And Irene Mack is right to say that Ernst often looks at Jupiter first in a chart just to see what is the true intention of the person. Because we know the sun, everybody knows the sun as being this critical arbiter of the soul in astrology. The sun is like the present dharma that the person is going to embody. Jupiter is what that is for. It's an even deeper aspect of dharma. Whatever your sun is, it's going to typically convey what you're going to get into as an occupation in life. You're a scientist, you're a biologist, you're into anatomy, whatever it might be. Jupiter is kind of like, what's the reason that you got into that? You might be into the science of biology. Why did you do it? To become a doctor? To study animals and plants? To contribute to the ecosystem? What is the deeper underlying motive? In the same way, Jupiter revolves around the sun, and the sun is not actually, this is what we're reading here. So when scientists want to see if there's life on other planets, they check for a Jupiter. Because without Jupiter, the sun actually spins on what it's called a barycenter. It's not just still. It's not saying still. The Jupiter of our galaxy makes the sun, it's kind of like if you were spinning around with someone and the person was revolving around you, because that other person was revolving around you, you would have a little bit of a spin like this. That's what's called the barycenter. So this signifies that having a Jupiter ultimately is very key for life on planet Earth. So there are plenty of primitive galaxies out there that have been discovered that have several terrestrial Earth-like planets that are unfortunately too close to the sun to have this Goldilocks effect that we've described here, where the water and other important minerals for Earth life could develop. It's too, the water would evaporate if it's too hot and too close to the sun, etc. Most of such planets in these primitive galaxies are closer to their sun than Mercury is to our sun, which is very close and very hot. Now, billions of years ago, Jupiter seemed to have done a critical thing for planet Earth. Jupiter in our galaxy pulled our inner planets away from our sun, number one, so that they weren't too close. It was Jupiter that really kind of arrayed the inner planets so that Earth was not too close, because Jupiter is so big. As well, Jupiter drew ice blocks into Earth's orbit, which provided water and other important minerals for Earth life to develop. Saturn and the outer planets also helped in getting Earth that ideal spot, the Goldilocks spot, in order for life to occur. So there had to be all these planets perfectly positioned in order for life to exist on Earth. Now, there's other things that could be said here. The moon, the Earth, and the sun have perfect ratio factors, being 108 times each other's size, which is a formidable synchronicity, considering the importance of the number 108 in Vedic numerology. It's often said we won the lottery with the way the planets revolve around the sun in this perfect way. The chances of life existing outside of our galaxy are often regarded as impossible odds. So it's quite a miracle that the arrayment of Earth life through the planets is the way it is. It's a miracle that we've been born into. And again, what we read is that often a lot of people think that there couldn't possibly be other life on Earth, on other planets, because Earth is so specific. It's nice to see my friend Teresa is joining us. Happy Mother's Day to all my sweet moms on here. I'm going to see my mom after this video and hang out with her and have some hot chocolate. I can't wait for that. My mom's sweet. So, what we are looking at here in the Western model, therefore, is that human consciousness is shaped by the physical galaxy. Already, I'm sure that some of you are going to be thinking in the way that I do about these things, almost as if the model seems incomplete. But here's what we have here. The Western model of the cosmos shows that human consciousness here, what we see with our chakras, the chakras do reflect the planets, and they do reflect the signs. What we see here is that human consciousness seems to be shaped by the physical galaxy. Through this divine glint of probability that life-bearing conditions might possibly occur in a galaxy like ours, life on our planet was born with the proclivities inherent in biology to evolve and progress upon itself in order to become more complex and more advanced forms of life. We could only do this with a galaxy like ours. Now, we start with the process of abiogenesis. First thing you need is a habitable world, just like our planet. It's the perfect distance from all the other planets and the sun. It's in that Goldilocks zone. So, what happened? How did life get created from there? What's interesting is that it's actually not entirely known. And this is something that's always interesting for me to talk about. This is abiogenesis. How do you start something from nothing? How did life, with all its DNA that is just inherently alive, where did that process come from? This was like the starting of a cosmic lawnmower. As the chemistries of lightning struck the base minerals of the Precambrian mud on planet Earth, at some point billions of years ago, a spark of life appeared out of the inert, inorganic matter of planet Earth. And this spark of organic life was sustainable in our habitable planet, in the environment. Some say that this spark of life probably came from microbes on those big balls of water that Jupiter gave us. It's an interesting guess, although if it is true, then the question still remains, where did those living microbes come from? Or how did they start? As we shall see, the Vedic people simply believe that this carousel is infinite, that it didn't just start at the Big Bang, and that life is only ever borrowed from somewhere else. The introduction of life on Earth has been commonly regarded as only being possible through a phenomenon called transpermia. This is an incidental injection of microbes from another form of possibly intelligent life somewhere in the universe, a kind of intergalactic Johnny Appleseed. How modern science tells the rest of the story is that over millions of years, whenever this initial seed of life came to us, or whether it just created itself through the conditions of life on Earth just magically creating life and making it happen. Over millions of years, human consciousness emerged after this living material went through multiple life-generating gestalts and mutation cycles. The process through which this gestation occurs was defined by Charles Darwin as natural selection. The microbe that is single-celled decides through evolution, instead of saying single-celled, for some reason, something causes it to split into two, and the two cells can split into more complex cells, so that eventually it develops zygotes that can become more complex organisms like ocean life, and this ocean life evolves to create more and more complex life. Through this understanding, the modern Western model of astrology takes on its metaphysical evolutionary narrative by insisting that the planets in our galaxy are involved in the slow process of mankind coming into full consciousness of itself. It suggests that human consciousness is a reflection of the array of planets, or in other words, that man is made in the image of the galaxy. All these things that happen with all these fish frogs, and these animals, and that eventually developed into primate-like characters that eventually developed into man. All of this has the vibrational tones of the planets in our galaxy pre-correlating it. And really, it's beautiful the way I'm describing it here. This is a mix of the Western and Eastern model at a level. The process of Darwinian survival of the fittest and natural selection through time carved and commingled itself with the fateful twirling of planets around the sun, each with its own seasons of celestial spring, summer, fall, and winter occurring along the ecliptic. And this in turn affected the gestation processes of life on our planet. Now, this is kind of like a Carl Jungish sort of idea. Human beings are a biological phenomenon entangled in the synodic cycles of the planets, just mentioned. As beings of infinite free will, whose choices do happen to have subtle psychic affectation by the planets revolving around the solar system. Thus, we could say in the Western mind that humankind, with all our so-called chakras and our unconscious archetypes, are fitted to the shape of the cosmos. The physical planetary schema of our solar system came first in this model, and our unconscious archetypes spin to the tune of that galactic prototype. In the same way that one may sense they're being watched, or that a bird or animal is hidden in a tree somewhere without, this is the nature of extrasensory perception. If there's an animal about, or if there's someone who can see you, they haven't made any sound, they haven't made any noise, they don't smell, there's no way why you should sense that there's someone watching you, but yet you can still sense that you're being watched. It's a psychic feeling. In the same way, humanity is psychically amenable to the planets affecting our destiny and our unconscious, whether we are aware of it or not. This is the Western model of astrology. The planets are here, Saturn's in Pisces, which means there's a vibrational effect that affects us here on Earth. It's not one that comes from within. It's the planets are affecting our state of evolution. It's the outside affects the shape of the soul. This is one of the reasons why people often kind of denounce astrology, or this is how the Western people build it. And this creates a difference in the Vedic versus the Western models of astrology, right? The Vedic people see that the internal movement of the soul happens first, and the planets just happen to reflect that. So this is what we're playing with here. For many atheistic philosophers, this is a good enough theory for at least making an interest in the art of astrology. And if that's what it takes for them to get into astrology, then good. Don't fix it if it ain't broken, There's nothing wrong with, hey, whatever gets people into astrology. This isn't the esoteric idea of astrology. This isn't the deepest root of how it gestated. This is the Western idea of Western people trying to understand astrology from the Western mind. The planets affect us, right? And again, it's both. That's what we're going to talk about. It's both. But this is why we're going through this video. When you talk to a lot of Western astrologers, this is how it's kind of conveyed. Now, perhaps it could be said that human consciousness is created by the schema of planets we have in our solar system. Maybe the idea of the solar plexus chakra, which is connected with the sign of Aries in our forehead and Mars and Scorpio. Maybe we have the idea of the solar plexus chakra because we have Mars in our galaxy. Maybe we've created the idea of the heart chakra that's assigned to Libra. It's connected to the kidney area of the body because the character of the planet Venus in our solar system seems to suggest this heart chakra. Perhaps these things aren't inherently connected. This is the tricky thing to think about here. Maybe other galaxies exist where there are other planetary bodies or comet-like orbital luminaries, which can expand into a completely different esoteric occult symbology, which either correlate with the 12 signs zodiac and the 7 chakras, or perhaps there are other galaxies with their other occult systems happening, with 13 signs or more. Perhaps our miraculous cosmos was here first, and we humans reflect our bodies and our so-called souls from our entanglement in the physical cosmos that we have been handed. Right? So what this is saying here, is, we talk about having the chakras, and the chakras reflect the signs, and the chakras also resonate with our planets and our galaxy. The root chakra is Saturn. The Svadhisthana chakra is Jupiter, and it's got a bit of Venus there too. The solar plexus often relates to the sun and to Mars, will. The heart chakra relates a little bit with Saturn, but mostly with Venus, the heart. The throat chakra relates with Mercury in communication. And then the crown chakra relates with the sun and the moon. So we have, even our planet having a moon is relating to Cancer. These seem like eternal archetypes. When you read the Veda we often describe as it's an old book of metaphysical inherent nature of consciousness. We just blew the dust off of an inherent form of knowledge. But if the Veda is an inherent form of knowledge, this contradicts the idea that humans reflect the cosmos. If our chakras are a permanent fixture in consciousness, then you guys see the divide here. How can it be that we are coming from the planets? The idea is that actually the planets are coming from us. This is a tricky thing to talk about, and we're going to move through it as we go along here. But this is the Western idea. Let's keep our apples apples and our oranges oranges. The Western model says our chakras are there because we have a Mars. Our solar plexus is there because we have a Mars. Our heart chakra is there. The idea of the heart chakra comes from the fact that we have a Venus. And maybe there are other galaxies in the world. This is what the problem with the Western consciousness. They say, what about other galaxies that don't have a Mars, that don't have a Venus? Are they going to have the heart chakra? Are they going to have a root chakra? Are they going to have the Ajna chakra? Are they going to have a zodiac? Because Venus correlates with Taurus and Libra. Mars correlates with Aries and Scorpio. What about other galaxies that have different arrays of planets? Are they going to have a completely different zodiac? This is what we are exploring here, folks. Seeing that life on Earth has these very specific requirements. It's that Goldilocks distance, the perfect distance from the sun. The 108 Earth's moons fitting into 108 Earths that fit into the sun. A Jupiter as our galactic liver. It's not so far-fetched to scientifically conceive that the galaxy came first, and us humans, with our chakras, with our the zodiac, our precious zodiac, and our unconscious archetypes of the Greek models of the pantheon of gods, in the Vedic pantheon of gods. All of these unconscious myths and archetypes could be marching to the beat of the physical cosmos that we've been handed, and not the other way around. Now, this is the Western model of the cosmos, and I'm sure some of you may be feeling an interesting mind expansion with this thought. The wise ones in the audience may get a looming sense that there's something bigger, a certain cognitive dissonance. What exactly is that? Now, this is the problem of anthropomorphizing the cosmos. It's an imaginative projection. And this is how Western people often denounce astrology. Right? We got this little dude down here, and he's looking at this face. He says, wow, there's a face there. But is there actually a face there? Or is it his imagination? There are plenty of other galaxies with a different planetary schema out there. A different array of inner and outer planets, comets, etc. And this would completely change the traditional correlations to the zodiac and to the chakras. Some people even have the idea of, what if somebody is born on Mars? Then Earth, there wouldn't be a Mars, and would Earth be the Mars? That's a painful question for astrology these days, but it's important to talk about it, because this is what the naysayers of astrology, this is their ammo, and this is why we discuss these things. That's an interesting problem that I haven't planned on discussing it really here, but we're going to go along, and hopefully this should give us some insight on it. The idea of other galaxies with other inner and outer planets, this brings a very fickle problem, which has left many would-be astrologers in the dust, makes them not interested in astrology. Seems like everything we consider classically, esoterically sacred and synchronous in astrology could be just our imaginations running away with us, suggesting we are anthropomorphizing the galaxy into something divinely designed and godlike, where really it's just a coincidence that the planets are the way they are. We've merely assigned these chakras and these sacred esoteric associations to these physical orbs that happen to be revolving around us. It's one of the primary issues that astrology theorists receive in trying to, when we try to convey the eternal validity of the practice of astrology. The question is it synchronicity or is it coincidence that the planets in our galaxy take upon themselves the forms familiar to us in holistic and metaphysical Vedic Greek sciences? The archetypes of the unconscious, the zodiac, the chakras, what the planets mean psychologically, etc. And this is that classic, which came first, the chicken or the egg problem in astrology. It has been submitted that we astrologers are somewhat anthropomorphizing the galaxy in the same way that people used to do to God. See, people imagined that God was a man-like figure, that it has male intelligence, and when the storms are brewing out on the sea and you're in the sea, you think, oh, God must be angry at us, as if God is a man in the sky having a human mind. Anthropomorphize, right? Anthro means human, and then morphize means to morph. So this rabbit here from Alice in Wonderland is being given human qualities, right? The word anthropomorphize, it's a word which logicians in the past have used to denounce those who believe in God, or at least the Christian God, as a humanoid father figure with a beard and human qualities of empathy, etc. Anthropomorphize breaks down into two different words. It's anthropos, which is the study of humankind's prehistory, as in anthropology, right? That's anthropos. That's a Greek word. And the word morph relates to the form of something. Just as in science fiction, when one thing morphs into another thing. This is this classic anamorph stuff. We actually know this root word in science through a caterpillar. And I should say here, this is a figure of somebody morphing from a snake into a child. And then here we have American Werewolf in London, where he's morphing his form. So we know the word morph from when a caterpillar morphs into a butterfly, right? Logicians of yesteryear would know this root word in science through the caterpillar morphing. The logicians of yesteryear would argue that Christian theologians were anthropomorphizing God in man's own image, because the subconscious has a tendency to do so. We imagine we see human faces in the clouds that aren't actually there. They are a subconscious projection of ours. So people have accused Christians of projecting human qualities, intelligence, and a man-like qualities onto God, which is essentially the blind, dumb forces of natural evolution. This is the argument that logicians have given against the idea of God. So anthropomorphizing is usually a critical word used to accuse somebody of let their imaginations run away with them. So it is with astrologers, who are similarly accused of anthropomorphizing the schema of the planets in our galaxy with qualities we associate with divinity, with metaphysics, with cosmic elements, fire, water, earth, and air, with chakras, and with these unconscious archetypes. And essentially with qualities that seem all too familiar and human, or earthbound, because we are on Earth and we're trying to explain the cosmos through our earthbound experience. But what these logicians would say is that you've got a fish, you've got a frog drawing a world full of frogs and saying this is the only way it could be, right? You've got a world being conveyed through the lens of that world, and it's going to look like that world. But the world could be, according to these logicians, beyond that. So this again this begets the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Do we humans merely reflect the solar system in our makeup, or we've anthropomorphized it to have these chakras and these human archetypal qualities through a subconscious projection? This is the attitude most modern Western astrologers have taken, is they say, well, if you can't beat the logicians, join them. For most atheistic Western astrologers, they abide by the left-brained ontology of the cosmos, the Big Bang, etc. And this is a workable model when you inject metaphysics into it. The injection of metaphysics into the equation saves this Western model from being incongruous, so that, guys like Carl Jung, for example, a scientific mind like Carl Jung, which is very not, it's steeped in science and rational philosophy. Someone like Carl Jung could justify and make sense of it and start applying it to scientific fields like psychology, and thank God for Carl Jung, for doing that. Carl Jung was a big, important player in the world of astrology coming to be understood in the Western mind. So these are metaphysical archetypes in the Western model now, is what we're talking about. Because the Western model, we know it still exists. The world, the galaxy, the physical cosmos, perpetuating its psychic anatomy into the human reality. So how does metaphysics save the Western model of astrology? Again, what we're talking about right here, folks, is this is Western astrology. We're not talking about Eastern astrology yet. And again, we're going to talk about how they combine. But this is the Western astrologer who's tapping into the right brain, but is still building it off of our culture's essentially left-brained model of the cosmos. But they're tapping into the right brain. This is like Carl Jung. Carl Jung understood the Big Bang, understood the atomic materialism of his time. But he also was opening up to how can the archetypes of the unconscious that seem so eternal, the things that are talked about in the Vedas, because he was interested in the Vedas and ancient things and shamanism and these ancient unconscious archetypes of soul and spiritual evolution. How can these two fit together? This is what guys like Carl Jung were trying to chase through the left brain material model. So how did Carl Jung justify his practice, at least to himself, even when many of his colleagues thought he was wasting his time and going crazy? A big part of it is because Carl Jung was open to what I call teleological arguments of logic, just like the Vedic practitioners are. He listened to the ancients, and he sought to retroactively explain their mystical sentiments scientifically, after first getting his hands dirty and applying the hypothesis of astrology himself, instead of throwing it away wholesale. And that's a true scientist, if you ask me. This is something that I'm saying here, is that Carl Jung was a scientific mind, and he thought, you know what, before I throw astrology away, I'm going to get into their consciousness. I'm going to get into the mind of the people who do astrology before I just throw it away wholesale. A true scientist, if you ask me. The concept of meta-archetypes is something which propelled Carl Jung to believe that humanity does evolve in stages which are predeterministic in a sense. So what do we mean by this? What do we mean by metaphysics? Remember our example of the caterpillar morphing into a butterfly? Well, I left out an aspect of this word. It's not actually morphing that happens when a caterpillar morphs into a butterfly. There's actually a specific word that we use, and it's not just morph. When we talk about the evolution of a caterpillar into a butterfly, the scientific word that we use is a specific type of morphing, and that is called metamorphosis. What is the difference here? What is the difference between morphing and metamorphing? Morphing is basically the same word as transforming. When we describe an object transforming its form or shape due to fire damage, for example, we can say that it has been morphed by the heat of the flame. A word we do not use to describe this process is metamorphosis. This is a doll being melted by combustion. This is not metamorphosis. It's not the same type of morphing as what we see with a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. This is metamorphosis. But combustion is just morphing. So, metaphysics, meta by my own definition, implies a pre-existing teleological state in a sequence of deterministic evolutionary events. It implies that there are stages to something that already exist. Numbers are meta because there will always be a concept of 1, 2, 3, 4, addition and subtraction, multiplication, etc. The periodic table of elements is so called because it is periodic in the sense that will always periodically reappear in any galaxy where humans come to understand how molecule chemistry works. Oxygen molecules interact with hydrogen molecules on this planet to create H2O, water, in the same way that it would on any other planet in the universe. So chemistry is meta. It has these meta qualities as well. In fact, I would have you know that the guy who discovered the periodic table of chemical elements, that's Mendeleev, he happened to be also obsessed with the tarot because it, in a sense, it held a similar eternalness to it. The stage of a butterfly coming from a caterpillar is a meta event that seems almost scripted in the basic mechanics of nature. So let's us understand that the capacity of fire to morph the shapes of objects, such as a plastic doll, for example, into something else, this has no teleological predetermined outcome, other than the inevitable, the products of combustion in chemistry. But there's a reason why we don't correlate the process of combustion, of melting something like this, with metamorphosis. Combustion is not an evolutionary event in the same way that a caterpillar metamorphosizing into a butterfly is. Right? The combustion is not evolutionary, but a butterfly is evolutionary. It has these meta stages involved. So our main question as relates to this discussion is thus: what is the genesis or definition of an evolutionary event? Why is that a thing? What underlies the phenomenon of the script of the universe to move towards coherent order and synthesis? Theologians have been inclined to call it intelligence, in the same way we've seen it in Ganesh Baba's cycle of synthesis. Although this breaches the Western model of a universe full of dumb, blind force and natural selection. There's no divinity or godly, unexplainable cosmic intelligence involved in explaining the metaphysics of a butterfly's life. Nor is there any mysticism necessary to explain the periodic table of chemical elements. It just is, in the Western mind, in the same way that mathematics just is. The likes of Darwin was already aware of this from a left-brain model. This is the gap which all our Western astrologers find their way into astrology through, and this includes Carl Jung. Although, in my opinion, Carl Jung might have been actually closer to my esoteric Vedic side of things, in my personal opinion. Metaphysical theory suggests that humans just happened in this galaxy to be formed by the influence of planets that just happened to have a 1 in trillion and more chance of embodying functional symbols of spiritual growth. Since we have no proof of when the Big Bang happened, for all we know, there's been so much time that has passed since the Big Bang, that the proposition of this 1,000,000,000,000 chance of life existing has had enough time, enough chance, enough space to coax through vast light years of random galactic dust and phenomenons and materia and random galactic chemistry and matter smashing together and mixing together to produce this possibility. And it's rationally feasible enough. There's enough time, because time is so infinite. So the big picture in this model still remains that the human psyche and our unconscious symbols of evolutionary and spiritual growth are a direct anthropomorphous reflection of the miraculous nature of our very particular galaxy, which, so far as this camp is concerned, is completely unique and one of a kind in the universe. So this mystical yet still rational model of astrology, for all intents and purposes, is an easier and better model to use as a bat to fend off those pesky logicians who may seek to denounce astrologers and the work that we do as astrologers in today's time. I say throw them the bread. Just tell them what they want to hear so that they'll recognize us, astrologers, as an institution that can really help people. Even Darwin himself understood the metamorphic stages of a caterpillar to a butterfly. So understanding these stages to be prompted by materialist biological evolution and natural selection is how this model works. So it's feasible enough to say that our cosmos represents the principle of natural selection on a galactic scale of life genesis, or an even more interesting word, abiogenesis. So however it has to happen, a lot of Western people, if you want to talk with scientific-minded people about astrology, this would be the route to do it. You can't do it in the Eastern way, which is what we're going to talk about next. You can't talk about the soul other than the soul being a causational apparatus that moves through the flux of a material reality, of our physical cosmos. The physical planets out there have vibrations that affect life on planet Earth through our extrasensory vulnerability to the vibrations of those outer planets and those planets of astrology. And it's those planets of astrology, just like how people say the moon affects the water on the planet, and we are made of 75% water. And the full moon, when it's full, it affects the tides, and so it also affects us. This is all a causation at a very physical level. And most times, astrologers will play with this with scientific-minded people. And again, throw them the bread if that's what you have to do, so that astrologers don't look like fools to these scientific-minded people. The Western people find themselves getting sucked asunder by the scientific logicians of the world. And so they oftentimes have to find ways like we just described to display and describe astrology to people. But most astrologers who have really gotten into it don't feel like fools, because they are mystics. And mystics, just like the clairvoyant people who could sense the turning of the planets from inside themselves, they don't necessarily need to explain things scientifically, because they know what's going on in the eternal metaphysical script of human consciousness. That came first in the Eastern model. And astrologers amongst each other always skip this conversation. It's fun to talk about, but essentially, if we're going to really delve into astrology, you just don't, you see it as a synchronicity, a metaphysical synchronicity. Consciousness comes first, and the planets happen to reflect that. Let's start getting into the Eastern model of astrology, which is, of course, that the cosmos is fitted to the metaphysical shape of consciousness. How is that going to operate with things? My friend Susie Underwood has given us a good point. It's a shame that any astrologer should feel that they need to play to a potentially unfriendly crowd. And that's what it's all about, Susie. And I'm glad that you guys are vibing with me here with what I'm laying down. Because Susie's absolutely right. When you're flying with something that works for you, you got to just roll by what works for you. You know, I mean, I'm a scientific-minded person. That's why I'm making this video and blending both, because to show that they really do fit inside each other. But I think Susie makes a great point that nobody should ever feel stupid for exploring a passion that feels great to you, even if it's the craziest thing in the world, in my opinion. It's just always good to be informed by all of the fields of awareness. Have your crazy thoughts, you know, as long as you can still sit and, again, like I said, throw them the bread and talk scientific, rational mind. Just to be able to sit there and do that. But that's just me. I love being able to talk in this way with people. So the Indian esoteric model of the cosmos says that the cosmos, these planets, are actually fitted to the metaphysical shape of consciousness. How does that work? The miracle of life on Earth, with all of its very specific measures, is regarded as a stroke of sheer dumb luck in the understanding of Western and modern interpreters of the cosmos as we know it. Let me say again, as a Vedic person, that it's indeed useful and not untrue to understand the universe from this vantage. Here again, we have Ganesh Baba's cycle of synthesis. Atomic matter is down here, and it evolves from atoms to molecules to amoebas to fish, mammals, all the way up, right? And this is this idea that matter, really in the Western, matter comes first and consciousness reflects how matter has come out. Again, in the Indian esoteric vision, consciousness comes first and it creates into matter. Now, we have to understand, it's important to consider that the ancient Vedic and Indian philosophers were no stranger to the concepts of gravity or the atom, as many Vedic sympathizers will have you know. But the Vedic prognosis, did and does simultaneously abide by a counter concept or model of the cosmos, one which is not incongruent. This isn't to say that the esoteric mind cannot find harmony with the esoteric rational left brain. But instead, the Indian model has the Western model for its cosmic foreground. Everything we've just talked about, the Western materialism, the atomic materialism, this is the foreground for the heart and soul that is the esoteric evolutionary soul narrative. So let's start to unfold the Vedic conceptual background of the cosmos a little bit. The first thing to be said in Indian cosmology is that the Veda is primary. The Sanskrit language, which the Vedas are based off of, is built from the celestial language of the astral spheres that our galaxy happens to reflect. I often say that the Veda was not discovered, but instead rediscovered. It's like the periodic table of elements. Hydrogen is always going to interact with oxygen by taking two oxygen molecules in order to make H2O. It's the same on this planet. It's the same on any other planet. Oxygen always has a certain, if you understand chemistry, it's got a certain amount of protons and neutrons. That's what oxygen is. It's the same on this planet as it's going to be on any other planet. In the same way, the tarot is another version of this. Where did the tarot come from? There's a numerology to the tarot that is ancient, that just keeps, it's periodic, it's perennial, it's eternal. The Veda is similar to this. It's already written. We humans can only blow the dust off of the book, as if it was written in the ether. And they say even the vowels, the consonants, etc., in Vedic Sanskrit are constructed from the planets and their deities as an ontological baseplate. For example, the sun resonates with all the vowels. Let's see, the A's is, this should say the sun. Yes, Earth. And that resonates with Mars. This is an interesting picture. I guess I should have poked at this more. Oh, so these are kind of all the vowels. Anyway, how I understand it is, as it relates to astrology, is that the sun resonates with the plant, with all the vowels. Mars resonates with the k sound in the back of the throat. This, unfortunately, that picture is showing perhaps a different conveyance of this. I'm getting this, I believe it is from the astrological Phaladipika. I believe that's how Ernst describes it. I have a video with Ernst called No Birth Time, when we're discussing what do you do when a person doesn't have a birth time. One of the things Ernst said is that their name will resonate with one of the planets that correlates with how far in the mouth the sound is coming from. Is the sun, K is Mars, and then in the back of the throat, G is also Mars stuff. Then Cha and Ja are like Cha, Ja, that's like mid-mouth, and that's Venus. Saturn represents Pa, Ba, Ma, the lips, using the front part of the mouth, and that's the furthest out, just like Saturn is the furthest out. So the Sanskrit language is rooted in cosmology. Some would say that cosmology is rooted in the Sanskrit language. They are one eternal beingness. So the Vedic understanding of the Vedas and the Sanskrit is that the Sanskrit language is perfect and eternal, and it existed transcendentally prior to its emergence here on planet Earth. Since the planets and the chakras are described in the eternal Vedas, it's fair to say that the Vedic idea of the cosmos is that our galaxy just happens to be fitted in a shape suitable for the growth and sustenance of the very particular frequency of the eternal spirit that pervades human consciousness. It's almost as if there's human spirit and it says, okay, we got to exist somewhere. So spin the wheel, spin the motor, let the random material generator of the cosmos, the algorithm of the universe, spin over trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years until some point, after some big bang, after some trillion-year process, there happens to be a planet Earth that can have a certain distance from the sun. It has all the planets, Venus, Mars, Mercury, all these things that resonate with the Vedic prognosis of consciousness. And until that one perfect galaxy makes that shape, human consciousness will not exist. Thank you, Susie. Susie is taking my questions here. I appreciate you. Someone asked what's the moon sound for the vowels, and it's soft semivowels, Y, R, L, V, S, and H. Hannah, Sean. Thank you, Susie, for fielding that question. So, our galaxy happens to be in a shape suited to the eternal spirit that pervades human consciousness. The natural selection on a galactic scale in which our universe moved through is just another one of many gardens of God in the eyes of the Vedas. Since reality is infinite, all the human frequency needs to do is astral travel the universe and its many multiverses until it finds an antenna tunes to this soul's karmic data. As we will discuss, this is really the opposite of the Western model, where consciousness emerges from the material. In the Vedic model, the soul emerges from the infinite, which transcends space-time, and then it is magnetized to some field in the fabric of space-time where a universe like ours aligns its planets in a way that suitably resonates with the karma of the person's, of the soul's past life. So we have a cosmic foreground and a cosmic background. In ancient times, it was understood that the ground of being, that's the earth and matter, material, the atomic materialism, atoms, these were just the cosmic foil of consciousness. That's the bottom of the food chain of consciousness. A stage upon which the Leela, the play of God, unfolded. That's the material reality, and God comes first. Just as my mind is what moves my finger. Isn't that amazing, by the way? Look at all these atoms that I'm moving. And how am I moving it? It's true that it's being moved through nervous synaptic movements inside of my brain that cause the lights of my nerves to move this material meat suit. But what is it that is holding that? It's consciousness. I am moving matter with my mind right now. And so does the great mind, the animus mundi, or soul of the world, act as a subtle agent which prompts the movement of matter. Susie is correct that the vowels are the sun. So all the vowels A, E, I, O, U are perpetuated by the sun. So for Irene, the sun would be important for you in your chart as your name lord. That was a question that I thought I'd respond to there. So we know that mind is moving matter. And just as my mind moves my fingers, so does the great mind, the animus mundi, the soul of the world, act as a subtle agent which prompts the movement of matter. On the micro scale, this means our meat suits moved by our individual mind. And on the macro scale, this means the earth in alignment with the planets which make up astrology. Really, this goes to say that it is no coincidence. It is a designed cosmic synchronicity that our planets happen to psychedelically align with the holistic spiritual consciousness of the chakras and the zodiac. In other words, the galaxy was made in the image of man, which is based on divinity, not the other way around. We see here on the left, we've got divinity and the archetypes of the soul. This perpetuates through our human form, and our human form is going to go through the algorithm of the universe creating universes until a galaxy happens to fit these inherent divine archetypes of the soul. Our galaxy contains a Mars that correlates with the eternal archetypes of Aries and Scorpio. We most interestingly have an inner planet, Venus, that correlates with Taurus and Libra. In fact, Venus as the morning and evening star just happens to synchronize with themes of earthy, fertile Taurus, and the synodic cycles of Venus correlate with the fertility cycles of women giving birth on our planet. Again, it's, this really is a wonderful miracle. So, the ancient Indians have never questioned this alignment. Oh, Teresa just gave me a donation, and Teresa, God bless you. You always give me a donation. I very much appreciate you. The ancient Indians have never questioned this alignment. They have taken it even to be designed by a creative intelligence principle in the universe. The Indians have a teleological argument for the integration of astrology in the universe, which suggests that the principles of creation and the esoteric divinity of the soul came first. And our galaxy just happens to have shaped itself, or we've been incarnated into a galaxy that happens to have the mystical design of these inherent consciousness principles. My friend Susie is doing great answering questions in the chat, and I appreciate you. And I would agree with what Susie put there. So, we have two views on the matter here. Whether your conception of the cosmos is phenomenological, that's the modern Western, or teleological, which is classical Indian. Both lenses meet at the observational science of astrology. My friend Irene has also tossed me $10, and I thank you so dearly. You guys really make this a pleasure for me, just really having you here. But the donations are appreciated as well. So here we have consciousness as the primary ground of being in the teleological argument. And then we have matter as the primary ground of being in the ontological, phenomenological argument of the cosmos. So, let's explore Vedic epistemology and teleological arguments about reality. We're going to delve into the esoteric concept of creation in the cosmos. Now, let's first say again that these two concepts are really looking at the same reality from two different hemispheres of the brain. With that being said, the soul-centric, right-brained model of astrology, it's the esoteric, it's the Vedic. This is one which does not require an openness to metaphysics. The soul-centric, right-brained, intuitive philosophy is one which requires an openness to the idea of metaphysics. And this can skip steps in its empiricism simply because the source agency of cause in this model is an idea that can't necessarily be proven outside of argument and inference. The Big Bang is the same way, but I digress. Now, let's first Susie's made a cool little comment here. Susie says, I once heard that we are Vishnu having a human experience. And that's very much how I often convey this whole thing, Susie. Susie asked Vic G, why the experience was desired. I think the best answer for why are we coming out and doing this? Why is Vishnu having this experience? It's a hard thing to really truly answer, but in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says the reason that humans have this human experience is because it is through Prakriti, through the elements of matter, that we can experience and ultimately experience ourselves. We are life experiencing itself, which is beautiful in its own way. But there's also life is full of a certain type of suffering. We need to go through the suffering of identifying in our minds with materia and practice yoga, practice kundalini, practice self-realization so that the mind can get in tune with ultimately being Prakriti as well as Purusha, which is spirit and matter. And by doing so, the Purusha can experience itself as being separate from the Prakriti, see itself in oneness, and then it's ironic that in Patanjali, you have to see two in order to experience the one as two. And we are having this experience in order to come into self-realization. That's my best answer that I could give on that question, Susie. Panentheism, a dream within God. Cool. Anders Totten has almost described what we're talking about as panentheism, a dream within God. And I like the way that you're putting that. That's definitely how the Vedic people see it, as we are a dream of Vishnu who is sleeping. And when Vishnu wakes up, it'll just be the world being awake with pure nothingness but vibration. And then there's another day where Vishnu sleeps again, and we come into the specific forms of human life that we experience. Psychedelic stuff for sure. So, let's start to explore this Vedic idea of what I call a teleological argument of reality. Let's first define this word teleological. The word teleological is defined as panentheism, is the word that Anders was trying to say there. The word teleological is defined as related to or involving the explanation of phenomena in terms of the purpose they serve, rather than of the cause by which they arise. This is classically hated by people who are atheistic and empirical and evidence and science-based. And often understandably so, because this attitude is susceptible to breeding superstitious and dogmatic religious worldviews, which I'm sorry to say, this teleological argument really does bring the plague of dogma, of superstition, of religious underthinking. So spiritual metaphysics has its ugly side as well. That's why I'm trying to bring these two together. I'm trying to harmonize the hemispheres of the brain in this video, folks. With any teleological argument, we are using inference and incidence to pull together an explanation for something without necessarily chasing a trail of rational means to the ends we seek to explain. I correlate this with imaginative right-brained activity, which again, the Vedic method of knowledge is not averse to using within their models of reality, so long as it is in harmony with the left brain, as they seek for these two to not undermine each other. They use the left brain analytical mind to confirm what the right brain intuits. And this is just like what Carl Jung did. And that's why, again, I really respect Carl Jung for the way his consciousness works in this way. So, explaining the Vedic method of knowledge, or what is called Vedic epistemology, would likely be a worthy video in itself. Will suffice here to give a succinct explanation. Epistemology is essentially the study of how we know what we know. This is a subject taken very seriously by deep thinkers in every tradition, but certainly so in the Vedic tradition. I'll borrow from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras to give a quick breakdown of Vedic epistemology. Remember, epistemology is how we know what we know. It's the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, validity, and scope. Vedic epistemology in brief. We have three forms of valid cognition. It's pratyaksha, which is direct perception of something. It's like seeing it, feeling it, knowing it. You were there. You saw that the car was blue. There's anumana, which is inference or teleological discernment. You know, it's like, you know, if there was in the ancient times when there was no understanding of color, or there was no descriptions of colors, there was no blue, for example. Somebody saw a bluebird and they pointed at it, and someone asked them what color was the bird. It's like, well, I don't have an exact word for it, but it's the color of the sky. That color we see in the sky, that's the color I saw in that bird. And so the other person is just going to have to take their word for it. This is inference. This is using logic with it, to describe things we can't necessarily see. And then there is shabda, or also called parampara. This is tradition or testimony from ancient scriptures. A big emphasis in Vedic methods of knowledge is the idea that something should not contradict what wise men have said repeatedly since ancient times. Since the ancients have always considered reality to be maya or illusion, there's plenty of room in Vedic thinking for theories of creation that don't necessarily need empirical proof, but are still worth pondering. So, I should have... That's okay. So we're looking at the esoteric model of the cosmos and creation. The soul model, the right-brained intuitive model. Using our inference, even though we can't necessarily directly perceive through scientific empiricism the center of where this is all coming from. Now, I want to use this definition of metaphysics as we previously gave it. Meta, by my own definition, involves a pre-existing teleological stage in a sequence of deterministic evolutionary events. So let us suppose we apply this to consciousness. The metaphysics of consciousness presupposes teleological stages in a sequence of predetermined evolutionary events, which has led up to the inevitable creation of our cosmos. And this happens to miraculously cater to astrology. to the symbols of astrology, the archetypes, the chakras, the planets, etc. The soul, as we know it, is a function of magic done by the universe. The ancient philosopher Hermes Trismegistus attributed this superconscious intuition inside of us all to Thoth, Mercury. It's the presupposition of teleological patterns inherent to the stages of human evolution. Now, I was supposed to have these books prepared, and I do not have them with me. I got at least one of them. This is an example of one of the books that I'm getting this from. The works of Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary's Game of Life are great background reading on this subject that we're talking about, if anyone is interested. You can find links for these books in the description of my video on Amazon. This is important. A lot of the ground of where I'm getting a lot of this stuff comes from The Game of Life by Timothy Leary, as well as some books by Robert Anton Wilson, especially Prometheus Rising is one of the great books that I recommend highly in general, but also especially if you're interested in the stuff we're talking about here. We are talking about the soul-centric version of the universe. In this soul-centric conception of the cosmos, we may contend that our current meta stage of life on a planet like ours is as predictable as the meta stages of a larva growing into a caterpillar and eventually a butterfly. As we've already said, the gods we know as the planets in the sky are actually made in the image of consciousness and not the other way around. The ancient dictum, which says the cosmos is a macrocosmic reflection of the inner microcosm of consciousness, is how we often describe this, as above, so below. So Indian astrologers, this is nothing new to them, because they have already known this for a long time. They've been chewing this cud for thousands of years. They flipped it on both ends throughout millennia until it became homogenized in the literature of the Vedas. As it relates to astrology, we can say that we have a Mars in our galaxy because the zodiacal archetypes of Scorpio, Aries, and the solar plexus existed first. That's why Mars exists in our cosmos. That's why it's there. We don't have a solar plexus because Mars was there first. Mars had to be there in order for us to be incarnated here. And of all the trillions and zillions of algorithmic universes being created, we fell into this one because Mars is here, and all the other planets that help to constitute our chakras. We have a sun, which all the planets revolve around, because the archetype of Leo and the Ajna, or the third eye chakra, the throne of the soul, existed in principle first. These psychological motifs do not come from our physical galaxy, but rather, our physical galaxy happens to be shaped by the eternal nature of consciousness, which came first. Again, the Sanskrit alphabet shows this sort of consciousness. The Veda is made up of the Sanskrit letters of the alphabet containing a resonance with the chakras and planets, and is said to be eternal. And human consciousness will forever manifest according to this timeless blueprint, wherever any galactic garden is fertile for it. Anders Totten is asking, have I ever read the Law of One series? And I haven't, Anders. I'm curious about it, and I'm going to have to check it out and see what it's all about after this video. Thank you for recommending it. The Law of One series. I'll have to check it out. Now, the practitioners of evolutionary astrology are similarly disposed, and so are many traditions and schools of astrology. Especially here in the West. There are certainly some superficial astrology schools, especially here in the West, who are only tuned into the planets as physical vibrations affecting us, and not as co-conspirators of syncretic soul energy from the beginning, as we are describing here. Anders says that there is a free PDF on the Law of One series online, and I'm going to have to check it out because they say that I would enjoy it. Thank you, Anders. So, let's start getting into some real fun, deep guts of Vedic cosmology. Vedic people, really what we're talking about here is Vedic mythology, Vishnu and Divine Mother, zeros and ones. Vedic people look to the mythos of Divine Mother for their cosmic underpinnings. To them, this universe is only one of many quantum multiverses that exist simultaneously and are even entangled with one another. Modern science fiction owes much to the sages of long ago who spoke of such ideas in ancient times. We are the material constituents of Vishnu, the One, the great dreamer who sleeps upon Adishesha, an energetic serpent that represents karma. Karma and Adishesha is the energetic memory of all actions and a teleogenetic response system between soul genesis and soul eschatology. Eschatology being the study of the end of things. In this case, the eschatology of the soul must refer to moksha, the so-called final liberation. Adishesha is the skin of Kali Ma, the vessel of mother memory Kundalini, carrying the blissful dreaming Vishnu through the predetermined evolutionary stages of soul metaphysics. We are light sprites of Vishnu, and the colors of our Jyoti, the light within us, our Kundalini light body, contain the memory code for the many spiderwebbing dreams or incarnations that we have lived through. This adds up to a teleologically progressive process of evolution. The caterpillar of the unevolved soul contains the blueprint of the metamorphosized adamantine butterfly within it. Thus, the soul is a kinetic phenomenon in Samkhya philosophy. And, this is a dualistic lens of something that's inherently non-dual beyond time. It all depends on the perspective. This is a very objective perspective on things. The non-dual perspective is that it's all one. The dual perspective is that there is these teleological stages. So, for our purposes, we have to remember here that we are both simultaneously the dreamer and the dream. And this leads us to the next part of what I'm trying to go through here. I'm further explaining what we see as how we came to be these physical things, why we came to be these physical things. Let's describe the creation of the universe from the sort of Eastern brain. My favorite description of a Westerner's attempt at a Vedic model of the cosmos comes from Robert Anton Wilson's psychedelic book. It's Prometheus Rising. He talks about something called negative entropy. So what is entropy? Basically, entropy means random, orderless chaos, meaningless, a lack of connection. Here in our world, there is much chaos, much just randomness. But for some reason, we also perceive harmony amongst it in our world. Why is that? How is it possible that I have a right hand and a left hand, and that they match each other? The cosmos is this dumb, blind force of mechanics revolving in random, unchartedly chaotic ways. How is it that out of the chaos of the ocean, the Varuna, the chaos of the ocean of the cosmos, there are these points of harmonic resonance, such as the human body, such as numerology, such as a plant that's got roots, that can give of its fruits? There is harmony in our reality, or else we wouldn't be here to speak to it. So we know the concept of random chaos exists. From the yin of chaotic Shiva Kali, entropy, comes the yang of law and order, Vishnu, who holds it all together at the center. Numerology, law, order, and beautiful synchronistic harmony, as we see in our world, seems to birth itself from the oceanic bosom of wild chaos and dumb, blind force and nihilistic meaninglessness. We know there is something that exists as an ordering principle in this world. After all, if there is any one thing that can prove it, I think, therefore I am. Let's see, I think, yeah. Somewhere along the lines, there is something thinking. And if I'm here thinking it, then there's a brain powerful enough to conceive it. Some ordering principle is surely moving through in order to say these words, let alone to have a brain powerful enough to conceive it. How can something come from nothing? Why is there ones coming out of the zero? So we know that the random concept of random chaos exists. Sometimes a spade is just a spade in this world, and things do happen for no apparent reason. We watch a leaf spiral from a tree, and within all the possible paths that it takes, I'm going to leave this here actually. When we see a tree falling off a leaf, and with all the possible paths it could take, it only takes one specific path. It lands among the grasses, and it disappears after the washing away of winter's snow and sleet, having no apparent purpose. In this double-slit experiment of life, the electrons do reach final and specific outcomes. Schrodinger's cat does have an apparently objective, affirmable reality. Sometimes the universe acts of its own mystical accord, and sometimes it is apparently without synchronous harmony to any principle. This is the idea of entropy, of chaos, of the crazy chaos of Kali Ma. So let's take this idea of entropy, the systemic chaos principle, with the idea of infinity. And I'm going to show this picture in just a moment. I often dismantle the Big Bang Theory with the teleological argument that there must have been something else that existed before the Big Bang. Because something from nothing is impossible. For there to have been a beginning of the universe, What existed before that? Life as we know it in our universe could only have been a wave that has emerged from the beginningless circle of infinity as just another universe in the multiverse. Or else, again, how can something come from nothing? Right? What could have started it? And what would have started that? You can't create something from nothing. Therefore, the universe as we know it had no beginning and will have no end. This is the idea of infinity. Now, let me just take a moment here because Susie's asking, how much of what we call chaos is misperception or lack of understanding? That's a cool question. Susie's asking how much of what we call chaos is misperception or a lack of understanding. Ultimately, all of it, Susie, because it all is in order. But just like with music, you can have a space of freeform jazz. And you've got the drummer is still got his beat going on, the bass player, all of a sudden everybody comes into this. It's all freeform jazz, but is contained within a set amount of meters. After about 16 bars, the drummer pulls back into a set drum groove. The bass player comes back into a set drum groove. Everybody comes into form again, and then there's more freeform jazz. But the freeform jazz is contained within order. And I hope that that's a good answer for what you're asking there. As Susie's always mentioned, is it that things happen for a reason but not always for a purpose? That's interesting. All of these things are different, interesting ways of thinking about this. And I appreciate Susie and Irene and Teresa for always breaking us into different ways of thinking about this stuff. Good, Susie. I'm glad that you appreciated that. So, we know that infinity is timeless and exists, and it keeps on coming through. It exists eternally. Anders Totten has said that the law of one calls this chaos a distortion. And chaos is as much a distortion as love is, whereas the center of reality, I think was what you're saying, is just what it is. Very interesting ways of thinking of all this stuff. So, infinity is timeless. It's eternal. And we can only be a wave on the ocean of infinity. There's no beginning and no end to it. So if infinity is timeless, and if there's a principle of random chaos called entropy, we have a wave. What is that wave? We have chaos in us, but we have much form. We have symmetry. We have minds that can produce forms. We are not chaos. We are not a glob. We are not space dust. We are space dust, but we are space dust that has become a form, a harmonious, syncretic form. So this is the wave. The bottom of the wave is what we come out of. Again, even the Big Bang might be a thing in this world, but what started the Big Bang was essentially the crest of the bottom of a wave from which previously life had already been existing. And then for whatever reason, Vishnu woke up, and then Vishnu went to sleep again. It's when Vishnu goes to sleep that the Big Bang occurs. Because we are the dream of Vishnu. So, if infinity is timeless, and there is a principle of random chaos, what we call entropy, what happens when we bring these two concepts together? We begin to get this sense, this idea of waveforms of creation and destruction dancing together like the yin and the yang in infinite regress. And this is this picture that we have here. Entropy and non-entropy spring from each other throughout time. Everything is a mutual arising with something else. If bigness exists, then smallness also must exist. If chaos exists as a principle, if there was chaos at some point before the Big Bang, order must reflectively exist somewhere, sometime, by contrast. Order and chaos wax and wane in cycles in order to embody the quantum multiplicities of the infinite. I am really hitting you guys with some very psychedelic, deep stuff here in my very own opinion. This, to me, comes from Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson. This is the why. I think, therefore I am. Why is that a possibility? It's because there couldn't be just nothing. Obviously, because I think, therefore I am. We are here. There must be a contrast to nothing. There must be a backside to nothing. And it's something. And that something must be everything. So, before we existed on this planet, what was there? The Indian philosophers talk about it as an infinite ocean of chaos, upon which the miraculous ordering principles we call life emerge like temporary waves. And again, we've called this natural selection on a galactic scale. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. We're getting to some really deep stuff here. If space and time are infinite, we must consider just how much time can pass between these waves of coherent life which we experience as sentient beings. At some level, there's really no way for us to conceive of it. Let us imagine that before we were here, the tumbler of time would spin and spin and spin infinitely, and the blind, dumb forces of matter in the petri dish of deep space crashed and smashed into each other endlessly, trial after trial of dumb forces of matter commingling, minerals and meteors and gaseous chemicals swarming endlessly in and out of each other. Out of this oceanic slot machine of random chemicals reacting against each other, since space and time are infinite, it was bound to happen somewhere along the line that abiogenesis, or organic life, would occur out of the inert dead sifting of inorganic matter. It was bound to happen that out of that flat line of chaos, there would appear chaos's opposite, some miraculous sense of order bulging onto the parabolic graph. Life is an inherent mirroring of the chaos out of which it is born. Or else we wouldn't be talking about it, right? If we weren't here with ordered minds organizing these ordered thoughts, then I wouldn't be here making this video. I'd be a blind, percolating wave of iron oxide on a lifeless planet, surfing the troughs of Vishnu's REM sleep, in between the waves of awakening. Somewhere along the line of our present timeline, however, sometime in the span of infinity appears to have occurred our life as we know it. And here we are riding the wave upward towards the soul's eschaton. The infinity that contains our material reality appears to have no beginning and no end. This is what Vedic people have always referred to the mystery of zero, the eternal circle. Before Vishnu, the one that we are, before Vishnu, the cosmic one of the living soul, there's an oceanic nothingness out of which the somethingness comes. This is Kali Ma, the Great Mother, the unconsciousness of Shunyata and the 12th house. Infinity, the ocean of Divine Mother upon which the waves of the soul cyclically submerge and emerge anew. So the Big Bang really could have only happened inside of a continuum. This continuum of infinity, if it is endless, may well contain every single thing that could ever be conceived somewhere inside of it. You've likely heard of the idea of parallel universes before. Maybe somewhere there exists in another universe that's basically the same as ours. All the possible points led up to the present reality, except that in that reality, when I dropped this piece of Palo Santo, very nice. This piece of Palo Santo is either going to drop to the left or the right. I'm not sure which. Let's find out. Drum roll. It fell this way, I think. Yes, it fell this way. It could have gone that way, and it could have gone that way. There are universes where it went the other way. Both exist. All of the possible universes that could possibly exist do exist somewhere, somewhen. In a separate timeline. And I might have been here and I might have had a green handkerchiefy ascot thing instead of an orange one. In another one, I might have had a nose piercing and a red shirt. All of these things that could possibly exist somewhere do. We've heard of this as the Mandela effect, where multiple universes exist simultaneously at the same time. And you can unwittingly get pulled into another timeline. It's the stuff of many science fiction stories. This is the Vedic conception that the one of Vishnu, meaning our soul, has the zero of Divine Mother for its cosmic background. We are the one that subsists through the zero. Our soul spins through the random universe generator algorithm until it finds a suitable universe with an astrological signature that perfectly aligns with the karmic soul memory and ancestral coloration taken on by the soul's previous sojourn in another life, perhaps on another planet, and perhaps in another universe. Perhaps there are many universes or earth gardens in existence available for the soul's unfoldment. Or perhaps we just continually return to this planet for one reason or another. That much is unclear, at least to me. But if there are plenty of lives that we have and plenty of, this is a garden. Earth is one garden. And it's likely that, we may die, go off into some other multiverse on some other planet and perpetuate some other karma. And then when we die on that planet, we go to another one and then another one. And then we die in a certain way where the karma, the planets are aligned in a way that they say, you know what, this person would be perfect to incarnate back on planet Earth at our particular coordinates from the Milky Way's center of our galaxy. This particular solar system, we have a karma, then this universe best suits the karma of that incarnation. So we probably have been on Earth more than once, but it's not necessarily to say that we only ever reincarnate on this planet. We could also have other things going on other universes. So the following is a quote from the brilliant Indian sage named Sri Yukteswar. And he was the guru of the famous figure named Paramahansa Yogananda. And Sri Yukteswar was himself a very respected Jyotishi. He says, a child is born on that day and that hour when the celestial rays are in mathematical harmony with his individual karma. His horoscope is a challenging portrait, revealing his unalterable past and its probable future results. Thus, in the Vedic gnosis, there are, among the many oceans of universes teeming with probabilities and chaotic outcomes, some rocky bastions of coherence and coherent order that have emerged like miraculous single-celled life forms out of the primordial deep. And these rocky bastions of life that the soul is attracted to, it is these rocky bastions of life that the soul is attracted to when seeking another sojourn in the earth sphere. So, this is we're talking about the perennial nature of astrology. It's eternally recurring through the same way. Explain scheduled C-sections, if so. B is asking, how do we explain scheduled C-sections in relation to everything that we're talking about? I would say that just like how a baby being born has its mathematical karma arrayed with the universe, so that if you're born to a woman, the first breath that you take is the stamp of karmic alignment. That's what has been said, and this is what I've heard from various sources. I can't note any sources on this, but this is how it's been often conveyed, is that when a person takes their first breath, that is the stamp where the person reflects the cosmos and the planets. That's the natal chart. The first breath of a baby outside of the womb during a cesarean section is the same thing. That natal horoscope impressed at that moment is the imprint that is created, which the soul from its previous life would be seeking. I want to be born as a C-section baby. That's my karma. And it needs to be in that universe, because our universe aligns with the natal horoscope soul of that person. I hope that is clarifying, B, and I hope that gives a little bit of food for thought on the question that you've asked. So, the perennial nature of astrology. From here, it seems that we can talk about astrology as a vibrationally coherent ordering system that confers the karmas of the soul. It may be instructional for us. Hold on, let me just check here for a moment. Right. Yeah, I'll put this here. It's instructive for us to imagine other universes with different vibrational ordering systems in our galaxy. I know where I'm at. So we know it takes a Jupiter, our galactic liver, to keep a galaxy like ours in proper orbit. We know it takes a moon as a sort of mini Jupiter to keep the planet Earth in proper rhythm and harmony. Perhaps there are other galaxies where there are only these basics existing on them. Imagine no Mars in a galaxy. It's got a Jupiter, it's got a moon, it's the Goldilocks distance from the sun, so life could still congest and gestate and be, allegedly, created and put on this planet. So imagine an Earth in a galaxy where it has all the things needed for life, but there's no Mars. Maybe only jellyfish can live there. There's no muscle, no grip, no spine. Imagine a galaxy with no Venus. Perhaps only minerals and chemical reactions can take place there. Imagine a galaxy with no Mercury. Perhaps there are hominids, human-like creatures who never develop fingers, language skills, tools, or other artifacts of transhumanistic intelligence. That's very mercurial stuff. Perhaps it has all these things. Perhaps it has Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, but there's no Uranus. There's no prompt for biological catalysis and evolution, and probably, it's argued that Uranus is the grandfather that pushed us out of the water as single amoebic life forms and pushed us out into the world to become frogs, to become eventually strictly land-based mammals that became humans. So maybe we could have a galaxy with all the planets except for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and we'd never make it out of the ocean. Imagine a galaxy that has a Uranus and everything else, but no Neptune. There'd be no transcendental connection of heart beyond the personal boundaries of these unevolved Neanderthals. Imagine it's got everything, including a Neptune, but no Pluto, no soul, no transmigrating evolutionary soul purpose. Perhaps there are other celestial bodies in other galaxies, strange comet-like bodies that revolve around and cause changes to karma that are totally unlike what we experience in our galaxy. According to Vedic astrology, there are no coincidences. Vedic cosmology, I should say. Perhaps there are galaxies like that do exist, but they could not be said to have the capacity to climb towards the soul's eschaton that we lucky players have on this great stage called planet Earth, in our positions, in our solar system, coordinated in a certain distance from the center of the Milky Way galaxy. We are very lucky to be here. You know, oftentimes I often consider myself lucky to be born in North America. In the same sort of like way a lot of people say it's a lot, you know, being born into a hard life is a very common thing on planet Earth. It's the same thing. We won the lottery just by being any human anywhere existing on planet Earth. Even any animal on planet Earth has got some luck. Although, again, from the soul's perspective, if we are Vishnu, that luck is something that is that we have as Vishnu. Vishnu is going to place himself on a planet where he can experience these things, you know? Humankind can only grow as we know it on a planet like ours, in a galaxy like ours. Because as we know, the chakras and planets build on each other from the root chakra to the ajna chakra. If any pieces are missing, then something key will cause the whole chain to go out like a string of Christmas lights. And I should be showing these pics here. Reincarnation as correlated with time. And again, here we have Vishnu, the oversoul, embodies a metaphysical memory in a galaxy shaped or fitted like that memory. The chakras build on each other in an integrated and synchronous way that reflects the light of the rainbow. We are born through the so-called miracle of these intensely specific life-producing conditions. Now, I've described in many videos that I think the base plate of inner and outer planets up to Saturn in particular are inescapable aspects of human cosmology. The 7 planets of ancient theology are what create the chakras, according to my conception, and they inherently relate to the signs, as we can see from this picture. Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn. Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. Mars rules Aries and Scorpio, the solar plexus, the 3rd chakra. Venus rules Taurus and Libra at the heart chakra. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo at the throat chakra. And then the moon and the sun are the king and queen that rule the ajna chakra. That's Cancer and Leo. So this is a no coincidence thing, especially as relates to the first 7 planets. Now, I do believe to be the case that we humans cannot do without these 7 grahas as basic grippers or graspers of our physical, energetic body karma. Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. I should switch Jupiter and Venus, but in any case. The 7 planets of ancient astrology make up the 7 layers of the chakras. However, within that, I do believe that all the other minutiae of our cosmos, especially the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. In particular, I think that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto really have to do with the crown chakra and with very inherent aspects of human consciousness. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto particularly, because I've studied them and this is the vibe that I get. But I have to give the caveat that it's even possible that other galaxies could have other outer planets and other comets. And this is my point. Personally, I believe Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are pretty intrinsic to human consciousness. But also, the comets, the asteroids, and the other stellar phenomena that revolve in our astral atmosphere are all specific to the karma that we are growing through as humans in this particular galaxy, this particular one. The first 7 planets, I think, are always going to be there. You could go to another universe, another galaxy, where all the conditions of life are perfect. You will likely find Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn that make up the chakras in order to have humans there that have the bodies that we have. I think it's likely they'll also have a Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But the comets could be completely different. And that is part of what gives us our very different individual karmas in each galaxy. We all share perennial, interminable needs in order to experience the very special phenomenon that we call human life. We all need a Mars that correlates with Aries and Scorpio in the solar plexus, as well as the houses that Mars is a karaka for. We need that in order that we won't be like jellyfish. As well, we all need a Mercury that correlates with the nervous system, along with Gemini, Virgo, the throat chakra, the hands, and all the houses that Mercury is a karaka for. These are inescapable aspects of being human. But the other players in our cosmic bench, the outer planets and the comets, do play a role in what makes up the specific karma of the beings living here in our particular coordinates of the Milky Way galaxy. In my opinion, it is possible that you may experience something that causes you to have a sojourn in another galaxy with a spotty auric field, such as one with no Mars, but all the other planets, or even to be born on a Mars, which would be a very strange absorption of certain colors in the solar plexus chakra, etc., if your karma called for that. We could be born in galaxies with nothing but comets and other estranged planets that manifest dilapidated life structures and weird, alien, mutated human being figures. But I do not believe that such galaxies would likely create the miracle of the human body as we know it, other than some Frankensteinish beings which, in all honesty, could be valid vessels of Jyoti, of the light in the soul, for those who are living through them. This gives me pause for a moment to stop and thank Brahma, the great instigator of intelligent design, from whom the Vedas and the branches of eternal knowledge have sprung. I thank Vishnu deeply for the chance to experience human life in a galaxy like ours and be a part of this miracle in what seems to me to be the most ideal of circumstances. Although it is always possible that other galaxies exist, like the Hindus have always expected, other lokas, or perhaps higher frequencies even beyond the zodiac astrology as we know it exist. There could be things more, even deeper, or even more intrinsic to consciousness than what we see in our zodiac and our galaxy. Whatever may exist out there, I'm glad to be here with all of you. Aho. Thank you, Earth Mother, for giving me the life that I have, whatever form it may take, on this upward journey towards bliss and moksha, where Vishnu and the Devas dwell at higher states of soul evolution. I just got emotional on that one. I feel very happy to be doing this presentation. Thank you, Teresa. I'm glad you're enjoying the slides. Susie's says she has mixed feelings about the asteroids. I hope that the way that I've described them gives a little bit of understanding there. The asteroids as just being another, like, bottom of the food chain aspect of eternal human consciousness archetypes. Chiron, I think I'm into it and stuff. I just don't see it as being as important as the first 7 planets and the outer planets. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying this. So, thank you, Jessica, Corrine, Teresa, Irene, B, and Susie for hanging out with me. Now, much of this lecture up to this point has been speculative, and it's amenable to debate. All I'm doing here is acting as the messenger boy for these 2 emergent conceptions of the universe, and to prompt our consideration in the West. Oh, yes. Darn, I should have shown all this. This is my idea again, that all the planets are related to the signs. The signs, and the 7 planets in particular of astrology relate to these signs, and the outer planets might have something to do outside of those chakras. I should have one more picture here. Ah, well, that's okay. So I'm acting as the messenger boy for these 2 emergent conceptions of the universe, the Western and the Eastern, to prompt our consideration in the West that there might be more mystical happenings afoot in the creation and design of our cosmos as we know it. Thank you, Lilith's nymph. I appreciate you hanging out here as well, watching from Poland. So, as far as the chicken, what is the chicken and what is the egg in the cycle of cosmic creation? The Vedic insertion is, I gotta find this picture again. Ah, here we go. I knew it'd be in here somewhere. So far as what is the chicken and what's the egg in the cycle of cosmic creation, the Vedic insertion is that consciousness begins it all, which the Western assertion is that consciousness is a miraculous updwelling of non-entropy, which is chaos's opposite, in a yin-yang dance that eternally persists in the base materia of matter, being at the bottom here. In my opinion, I'm with the Vedic people in suggesting that it all comes from consciousness, originally as the 0 point of the oceanic continuum we call Varuna, the ocean. However, the West is not wrong in asserting that the foreground does also have beginning and end cycles of matter in a Big Bang, etc. I conceive of it as a carousel whose rotating scenes are housed in the central axis of Vishnu, the cosmic dreamer, and Adishesha, the magic of Kundalini's cosmic creative grasp, which embodies the needs of the soul through the quicksilver of mind and Maya. abiogenesis, the stellar transpermia theory, the alignment of our inner and outer planets of astrology, all the millions of years of molecular and biological evolution that led me to being here was all done by the magic of my own Kundalini's creative powers. All it takes for Vishnu to wake up is for humans to cosmically wake up to the soul's eschaton, and for the Vishnu inside of you to remember what it is to be Vishnu, the oneness of absolute Krishna and true self-realization. To get beyond astrology and tap into the cosmic. If you're interested in this is something I'm really getting into, yoga and meditation, that in my opinion goes beyond astrology. Astrology is like a useful thing to understand on the way to the deeper reality that the Vedic people have perpetuated. Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, Jyotish is a limb of yoga, not the other way around. Yoga is the center. Yoga is union with the eternal self. And if you're interested in this sort of thing, I'm going to do a little plug for my great teacher of astrology as well as Kriya Yoga. Astrology is really just like Svadhyaya, which is one of the yamas of Ashtanga Yoga. It's a small part of yoga. Really, the bigger picture... Oh, I guess I was going to do another plug here later, so I guess I'm not ready for this yet, but that's okay. This is my teacher, Ryan, teaching Kriya Yoga. This mythos through which we can understand the statement that the galaxy and the planets within it are made in the image of man's consciousness. Remember we showed this picture? Gosh, I wish I had my pictures a little bit more organized in a better way, but like I said, I figured I was just going to throw this together in the way that I did. I think this picture basically describes it. Here we see, again, this picture. Divinity leads to the human form, which leads to our cosmos. This is that Indian model of it, right? Now, the thought that the galaxy and the planets are made in man's image, this is what we're talking about right now. For without man's inherent eternal consciousness, it does not exist, at least not for us. And that's the important point. We are the center of the universe from our own perspective. And this, in my opinion, is the real answer to that psychedelic koan. If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it still make a sound? If no one is around to hear it, then it doesn't matter. Or rather, it isn't matter. Because matter takes consciousness to reflect it, as we've all learned from modern quantum physics. So, ultimately, reincarnation is the big thing that separates modern, mundane Western astrology from the soul-centric astrology model, which is used by traditions such as Jyotish, Vedic astrology, as well as evolutionary astrology of Jeffrey Wolf Green. Talking about reincarnation and the idea of metastages that exist prior to human life on a planet requires an openness to a Jupiterian or intuitive metaphysical way of thinking, which strict bleached rational empiricism and evidence-based thinking cannot necessarily grasp confidently alone. This requires an openness to a teleological pattern of evolutionary stages that can only be tapped into by harmonizing the right brain of faith with the left brain of critical, rational analysis and reason. This is why Jupiter is almost the center of both. Jupiter is often conveyed as the reigning symbol of astrology, such as we see in the mythos of Zeus in the Greek pantheon. As well, a similar character to Zeus in the Vedic pantheon is Indra. They both use the thunderbolt as their main weapon. Both of these characters wield the thunderbolt This is a metaphor for spinal energies, bringing the fertile rains of God realization from the source of echoes within the innermost cloister of selfhood. It's the psychic water of the soul that Jesus said, once you drink from the spinal energies of Kundalini that exist in your ancestral energy, you will never be thirsty again for the lesser waters of lesser passions. The psychic emanating archetypes of planetary influence come from inside us, from the perennial microcosm of eternal consciousness that we all live within, and the structure of all human life as perennial as the grass. It is unique to the esoteric, soul-centric, occult traditions to regard there being an eternal soul. But that's not to say in the Vedic understanding that we don't regard the soul as being something so fixed that it doesn't evolve or grow. Really, a lot of times there's the soul, like the Jivatman, which is the moon, which is moving and evolving. This is the aspect of the soul that adapts and evolves. The sun is the eternal Atma. So you have to understand that there is an eternal soul, and then there's also the evolving soul, as the Western people would think of it. This is what evolutionary astrology is predicated in, that you're always getting closer to the eternal soul in every life that you live. It suggests an alchemical process that has been occurring throughout all the transmigrating incarnations of the soul. While some aspects of the soul have transmigrated as root essences of ourselves from incarnation to incarnation, we must understand that our causal body, and even what is beyond that, is still fluctuating. We cannot treat any aspect of karma caught in space-time as being permanent other than the absolute awareness within us, which witnesses the forms caught in each moment. The absolute is called Ishvara. It is the witness. It is the part of us that is God observing the individual astral, causal, physical layers of ourselves. There is something within us that is connected to the infinite, connected to the absolute, that is, just gives me shivers thinking about it, that is connected to Vishnu, that is Vishnu. Vishnu riding on Adishesha. The causal, the astral, all the karmas that fluctuate is Adishesha, but Vishnu is always the same. And that is Ishvara. Shiva is the same thing, really. If you understand Shiva and Vishnu, two different dimensions or ways of seeing the same thing. This is the predicament of mankind, who must release ourselves from the duality of left brain hemispheres by practicing transcendental meditation in order to become established and absorbed in the still witness, the true essence beyond the vrittis, the compulsions of karma, the eternal soul. Now, again, you can find sources to learn about this pure source of Jyoti, the light inside of all of us, by practicing. You can find it through works like Vasishta's Yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and in my opinion and experience, the doctrine of Kriya Yoga and other gems of Indian literature, which are based on what we're talking about. And as I said, there are ways of tapping into this that goes beyond astrology. My favorite, so far as I've experienced, is Ryan Kirksack. Again, really, he's the only Kriya Yoga teacher that I've known. So that's a bias I have to speak to. But it's been really good for me to move through that. We leave off with one last quotation again from Sri Yukteswar. And then, we'll chill out for the last little bit to see if anybody has any last-minute questions. In Autobiography of a Yogi, It's a book I highly recommend for any spiritual seeker. Sri Yukteswar is quoted as saying, "The message boldly blazoned across the heavens at the moment of birth is not meant to emphasize fate. It's the result of past good and evil, but to arouse man's will to escape his thraldom. What he has done, he can undo. He can overcome any limitation because he created it by his own actions in the first place, and because he has spiritual resources which are not subject to planetary pressure." And that is a wonderful place for us to end on. Sri Yukteswar. If anybody's interested, if you've ever read Autobiography of a Yogi, I highly recommend it. It'll always be my favorite book. And I'm so glad that you guys have been enjoying this. Let me know if you guys have any last-minute questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go eat some food. Jessica, like so many of us, has expressed a desire to learn to meditate. Because really, we are perfect underneath it all. Meditation is what allows us to be cognitively absorbed so that we can stop the fluctuations of our mind and see the truth of the beauty that our mind is. I'm glad B was here, and I'm glad that you enjoyed hanging out with us as well, B. Irene Mack, Teresa, Jessica, and Susie Underwood, my darling people, I love you guys so much. And I'm so glad that you guys get some good feelings and peace from hanging out with me and doing these live streams with me. This has been a good one. I'm happy for the energy. I'm glad, and I hope that everybody enjoyed it. Stick around later on in the week, folks. I've always got more stuff coming. I think this coming Sunday, I'm not going to be here, actually. So we shall see how things go. But after that, we're going to continue doing more rising sign videos, more nakshatra videos. And I'm going to be in touch always because I love hanging out with you guys. I love chatting with you guys. And I love doing these videos for all my followers. Let me know in the comments what you think, folks. We went pretty deep today. I was very excited to do it with you all. And thanks to everybody once again for hanging out and chilling. Be well, stay blessed, keep your eyes on the skies, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream that happens. Probably not next Sunday, but the one after.